charismatic cells. Here we go. Hello there, and welcome to Salon Gin and Tonic, the second installment of the Gothic Funk Press Salon series. My name is Connor Coyne, and I am your host tonight and the director of Gothic Funk Press. Gothic Funk Press is an independent publishing company based in Flint, Michigan. In addition to our Salon series, Gothic Funk Press publishes daring and progressive creative work from the Great Lakes state and from all around the world. For information on our books, our journals, our literary events and scavenger hunts and Mardi Gras crew and so much more, please visit our website at gothicfunkpress.com. Now, this salon is part of our curated reading series streamed via YouTube during this time of COVID. Before we start, I want to thank the Gothic Funk staff, my wife Jessica, who is moderating, our guest mixologist and our readers, and you for tuning in to join us tonight. In just a few moments, I will turn this over to Aren Hodis, our guest mixologist, and she will tell you about making and enjoying the perfect gin and tonic. But first, since tonight's reading series was rescheduled from last Thursday due to technical difficulties, we want to make that up to you and to our readers by hosting a book giveaway. So stay throughout the duration of this reading, and at the end, you'll have a chance to win a copy of 3 of our guest readers' books. And now, without any further ado, here is the salon.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aren.
Aren Hodis, your proud virtual mixologist, has been many things. This current incarnation sees her as the director of 2 film festivals and cultural events at the Sonoma County, California Jewish Community Center. She's spent over 10 years in the wine industry, making, selling, and educating people about wine, as well as working in winery management. In the core of her being, she is a writer, an artist, a comedian, a cook, a traveler, wordsmith, and a crossword puzzle enthusiast. During the pandemic, she writes and edits a daily film and culture newsletter and is creating a virtual international film festival and drinks a lot of very fancy wine, craft beer, and artisanal spirits because it's just what you do in Sonoma County. Please welcome Aren.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aren. I'm thrilled to be here. We have some awesome writers coming up, but beforehand, we should have some booze because booze and writing goes really, really well together, I would say. And today's topic is the gin and tonic. Now, you wouldn't think that this would warrant like a really big demo. It is gin, tonic, throw it on some ice, squeeze a little bit of citrus on it, usually a lime, but I'm going to use lemon today. But it does have a history, and I want to tell you a little bit about the components. Now, gin and tonic. What is gin? Gin comes from Genever. The word Genever, coming from Old English to the French, is juniper, the juniper berry. It's an evergreen. So gin is a distilled alcohol. It's clear, similar to vodka, very, very simple, but usually is defined as has to be passed through and infused with juniper. Pretty simple. And nowadays, gin is incredibly popular and lots of like boutique distilleries are popping up and they're having fun because you can add other spices. They call it a botanical mix to the gin, and you can put coriander and pepper and basil and caraway seed is one of my favorites. Now, just as an aside, a Scandinavian relative of gin is something called aquavit. Worth looking up. I think it's delightful. When you drink it, you sort of feel the essence of a preserved herring. In any case, back to gin. Gin became known as a British drink. It was very popular in the 17th century and moving all the way forward until today, but it has its origins on the continent. And specifically, the first reference in writing is in the 13th century in the Netherlands, or in Flanders, in Bruges. And they have Jennifer there, a Dutch version of gin, which is very, very popular. And what happened in the 17th century is it became very, very cheap to make gin in England. And people, it was so cheap that they actually flavored it with turpentine. And it came around during the Restoration with William and Mary. And it also became known as the Protestant drink. Now, there was a gin craze that literally happened from something like 1695 to the early 1730s. It was all the rage. And in London, there were more than 8,000 gin shops in the city of London alone in this period of time. You might remember William Hogarth. If I were doing a proper PowerPoint, you would see this amazing illustration that he's most famous for, and that's Gin Street and Beer Lane. The BBC later called it, and I quote, the most potent anti-drug poster ever. Because Gin Lane, these amazing, beautifully dramatic illustrations of people like skeletons dying in the streets, of alcoholism rampant because of gin, and how jolly and productive people who drank beer were as a contrast. And so moving forward, gin, English, tonic water. Tonic water, well, tonic is a health drink. It's defined as such in the dictionary. It's a cure-all, a health remedy, a health drink. And tonic water is known to be infused with quinine. And quinine is a remedy for malaria. To this day, malaria is a disease that is rampant all over the world. Hundreds of millions of people get it. 400,000 people or more died of it in 2018. Fevers, it's horrible, and it can recur. It is a single-celled organism passed along by mosquitoes in the equatorial regions of the world. Quinine, even though it's not the very first choice as a remedy against malaria, is still considered by the World Health Organization as an essential medicine to this day. Now, quinine is very bitter, and in the 1820s, the British soldiers began mixing quinine into water, into tonic, in order to make it go down. The doctors had it. Quinine, actually, more history on the quinine. It's from Peru. It's from Peru, from the bark of a cinchona tree. And it has been used as an anti-malarial in bark form since then. And in the 1820s, they finally figured out how to isolate it. The Spanish brought it back to Europe in the 1630s. Quinine being bitter, the British soldiers who had colonies, this is why it's a colonial, very, very British drink. We've got the gin, we've got the tonic in India. They mixed it with water, they mixed it with wine, they mixed it with lemon, lots and lots of sugar, and gin. And why gin? British soldiers had a gin ration. That's right. They got gin along with their paychecks. So they were able to mix that all together, and they got really used to it. It became a beloved beverage. Nowadays, our tonic water, and I've got a diet tonic water. Why diet? Because our commercial companies mix sugar already into our tonic water. And quinine isn't needed anymore as a remedy. This is more of that lovely bitter flavor that we've come to enjoy in the cocktail. And so it's a much smaller amount in here. Although if you drank gallons and gallons of this, it could still be therapeutic, but don't do it, guys. Go to a doctor if you're interested in quinine. It can be dangerous. It has lots of side effects. It is also a remedy for restless leg syndrome. Don't ask me why, it just is, for deep vein thrombosis and things like that. So we don't need to add sugar anymore because this is very sweet, the tonic water that we have. I have an artisanal gin from a local, really great distillery in my town. I'm part of their distillery club, so I'm going to give them a plug. They're called Young and Yonder Spirits, and this is the Harbor of Broken Souls. You can see all of the sailors in this beautiful illustration that kind of reminds me of Hogarth. And you can get that. I also have another, so many distillers in my area. I'm in Northern California, and this is Sips on Spirits from a town over. So yeah, let's do this. Let's make the gin and tonic. Quintessential British drink from, them colonizing the world, and needing to fight off malaria. And because they had gin, because it was cheap. So I've already put ice in my glass. Now, this is traditionally a highball drink, and most of the time in bars, you're going to get it in a highball. I don't have any at home. I have a lot of stemless wine glasses, and I like them because I can drink spirits out of them. Like they're a really good size for whiskey and wine, because I break stemmed wine glasses all the time. So yeah, it's sturdy. It has the right volume. Let's just put it this way. And I want to chill my glass in advance. I've got a lemon, not a lime. Please excuse me, purists. I started drinking it with lemon because my very first gin and tonic was in the tiny, tiny town of West Baltimore, Ireland, in County Cork. And yeah, it became the first spirit I ever began to enjoy because I was a lightweight in college and only drank beer. So without further ado, I'm gonna roll this. And rolling a lemon or a lime that you use it, it's great because it starts breaking up the oils and it juices it a little bit in advance. It's a really good idea when you're making a cocktail, roll your citrus beforehand. Really get the scents out and the oils, break them up. And I'm gonna cut a wedge out for myself. And I'm going to, because I like putting a few drops in advance. Some people only like half a squeeze. I'm gonna do a sort of 3/4 squeeze in here to sort of flavor my ice. I'm gonna save the rest for my garnish. And the ratio that you're gonna use for any gin and tonic is about double the tonic to the gin. So I'm gonna put in, let's say I'm gonna put in 1.5 ounces. So I've got my jigger here. Let's see that you can see it. Can we see it? We can see it. So I'm gonna put in 1.5. There we go. I'm really sticking to my sizes here. Thank you, gin. Oh, and I have enough for a second one, maybe. And now I'm going to put in 3 ounces of tonic water. Now, there's a couple ways of doing this. A lot of people are going to sort of just pour it, eyeball it liberally, and do it on the side of the glass, almost like when you're pouring a beer, because you want to keep the carbonation in there and not sort of destroy it and move it around a little bit. You can dump it in. They make these at bars all the time. I'm going to opt for the latter because I'm short on time and it's easier. So that's 1, 2, and 3. I'm also going to just give it a really gentle stir. So I want to keep that carbonation in there. And here's a little trick I learned recently. You can garnish with a tiny, tiny little bit of mint. I really like this. So just do a little bit of a crush, just a little bit, just for the aromatics, really. I'm going to just drop it in the top. I'm not going to mix it. And then I'm going to sort of douse the little edge of my glass here with some lemon. I'm going to do that. And I've got my gin and tonic, you guys. I'm going to say cheers. And I'm so excited to hear the writers coming up. Enjoy your drink. Enjoy the literature. Thank you to Gothic Funk.
Cheers. And I think this is probably about the most refreshing drink that I know. So let's dive into some literature. Our first reader is Latasha Carter Perry. Latasha Carter Perry is the author of the Kids Like Mine series of books and the creator of the For Kids Like Mine brand, both aimed at empowering Black and Brown children to value and love themselves as they are through positive self-images. Perry's work has been featured in People magazine, and 2 of her books, Hair Like Mine and Skin Like Mine, have been translated into French. Perry has also been invited to Washington, D.C. to discuss her work with the Congressional Black Caucus. A graduate of Flint Southwestern Academy, Perry is a wife and mom of 5. She says her hope is to leave each and every person she encounters with the tools needed to love themselves as they were created, unconditionally and unapologetically. So please welcome Latasha Carter Perry.
Hello, you guys. I'm so excited to be here tonight. At first I was like, should I be drinking since I'm the children's author? Is that gonna look, kind of, and I was like, yeah, I definitely should be drinking because I'm the one with 5 kids here. So I need the drinks. So, but I'm happy to be here to share my work with you all. Real quick backstory. I am a Flint native, and I've actually been writing all of my life. And I got married and had kids and just kind of pushed writing on the back burner. So fast forward, my daughter, who is 9 now, she was 4 at the time, and we enrolled her in a ballet class. She was teased about her hair, and that's when I knew it was time to start writing again. And so what I did was came up with this book, my very first book, and it was written in 2015, and it's Hair Like Mine. And from there, it just kind of took off, and here we are 6 books later, and getting ready to open up a bookmobile boutique, and that will be sort of like a hub for parents and educators to come and shop for diverse toys, books, and all sorts of things in that nature. So I want to, instead of reading an entire book, what I decided I was going to do tonight is read sort of like little snippets from each book. And I want to read maybe like my favorite parts of each book. So we'll start with Hair Like Mine. And I just want to show you guys the illustrations because they're just so beautiful. My illustrator, she's from Detroit, and she just did such an amazing job capturing the imagery just as I envisioned. She did so great. So the part that I want to read out of Hair Like Mine is, I searched all around. I was sure I could find someone with hair like mine. I only found no 2 people are the same. Everyone has different hair, nose, eyes, and toes. And this is the little girl with her mom. And her mom is just kind of ensuring her that being different is what makes us all beautiful, and that's what makes us all unique, and it's worth celebrating. And so she says, I know it's hard to understand now, but just wait, you'll see how amazing being different can be. There's no one in the world quite like you. You're unique and beautiful. And so by the end of the story, the little girl says, as I lay in bed that night, I thought, maybe she's right. It's kind of cool to know there's only one me in sight. I love my skin, my nose, eyes, and toes. And this hair of mine, I like it just fine. And that's Hair Like Mine. And this is actually my daughter who's on the cover. So she thinks she is a really big deal, and she is. So when we used to read bedtime stories when she was littler, she said, can we read my story tonight? So that's Hair Like Mine. And the one that is just kind of just blown up, and especially with the climate that we're in and everything that's just really in the news right now, Skin Like Mine has just, really just taken off. In the month of June and July, I sold over 70,000 copies of Skin Like Mine with no marketing team, no media, all sales, just me. And we sold 70,000 copies. So we're really proud of that. So it's the #1 seller right now, and it has been featured in just so many places. I'm always so surprised when I get online and see that we've been featured somewhere else. It's a great feeling. So one of the parts in here I'm going to read. My best bud in the whole world, Sean, we're like cookies and cream. When we're together, our skin color doesn't mean a thing because we know it's what's inside that matters the most. Color should never keep 2 people from being close. And that's what Skin Like Mine does. It just compares different skin tones to different yummy desserts. And this is my favorite illustration in the book. Like I said, the illustrator, she is just so amazing. And so it closes out and it says, Skin Like Mine is quite divine. In fact, I'd say it's one of a kind. I wouldn't trade for any other shade. I love my skin. Oh, how I love my brown skin. So that's Skin Like Mine. And then we have Baby Like Mine. And that's the newest book in the collection. And it's actually been taken off. The daycares really, really love this book. And what it is and all of the characters that you guys see throughout my books, they're my children. She took pictures of my family and she used us to draw the illustrations. So this is me and my baby boy and my second to youngest daughter. And when we first brought him home, she had a hard time adjusting to no longer being the baby. And so this story is dedicated to them. And my favorite part is mommy hugged. So the little girl was upset about her baby brother crying. And she was saying she wanted to get out the house and she was leaving. And she said, mommy hugged me tightly and said, without my favorite helper, I don't know what I would do. I know life has changed a bit and the baby demands our time, but just know how much mommy and daddy loves you, sweet daughter of mine. You're the best big sister and no one will ever take your place. Mommy has this great big heart and for both of you, there's space. And again, just beautiful, beautiful illustrations. So that's Baby Like Mine. And then we have my favorite book in the series, and that's Imagination Like Mine. And it's just about a little girl who imagines herself being all of these different things. And the real moral of the story is it's okay to make believe and pretend to be different things, but you will always want to stay true to yourself. And so it says, an imagination like mine runs wild and free. But of all the things I can pretend to be, there's not a thing that's quite like me. I'm as beautiful as a mermaid and strong as a tree. Just like the pumpkin, a light shines bright within me. Fearless like the eagle and bold like the flowers. Look at me, I have superhuman powers. I love to play pretend. It's my favorite thing to do. But of all the things I can pretend to be, I can't imagine anything that's better than being me. And that's Imagination Like Mine. And I just have to show you guys this page with the pumpkin because it's so cute and I love it. So that's Imagination Like Mine. And our final one, and I don't have all 6 of the books because these are my hardcovers. We recently just started offering hardcovers. And so Dreams Like Mine, because everybody's like, you have all of these books and they all have girls. And for me, I thought they were gender neutral. I didn't think that they were just for girls. But so they wanted me to do something specifically for boys. And that's what Dreams Like Mine is. And it's actually an affirmation and coloring book. And so it's just a little boy and he's imagining all these great things he can be when he grows up. An astronaut, a teacher, a doctor, a firefighter, a basketball player, a chef, and the end is the president. And so that's Dreams Like Mine. And so it's so funny because when I started, I was like, oh, my books are for Black and brown children. I just want to empower them because it's such, there's not many books that you can find out there. And you know, it's 2020 and there's more books that we're finding out there now. More people are writing books for little children that look like mine, but we still need more. And so that was my intent in creating these books. But then I realized that these books were not just for my kids, they were for all kids. I had parents from every race, all different cultures coming up and saying, hey, I read your books to my child and it really helped them with this and with that. Like a lady was telling me her daughter had red hair and freckles, and reading my book just really helped her daughter embrace who she was and felt comfortable and felt pretty after reading the stories. And so that's when I had my real aha moment that these books are for everybody. And it's a great chance for kids that are non-Black to see Black kids being portrayed in a positive way and being able to see Black kids celebrating themselves and see Black kids that are the hero of the story. And so I think these books are great for just about everybody. So yeah, that's the Kids Like Mine series.
All right, thank you, Latasha. And that was wonderful. And speaking on behalf of my two daughters, you should absolutely share those books with your children because my daughters love them. I think they are absolutely wonderful. So our next reader is Gemma Cooper Novak, whose debut poetry collection, We Might As Well Be Underwater, a finalist for the Central New York Book Award, was published by Unsolicited Press in 2017. Her poetry and fiction have appeared in more than 20 journals, including Glass, Midway Journal, and Lambda's Poetry Spotlight, and have been nominated for multiple Pushcart Prizes and Best of the Net awards. Published chapbooks include Too Much Like a Landscape by Warren Tales in 2015, and Bedside Manner, The Head and the Hand, publisher from 2020. And that latter, Bedside Manner, is part of our giveaway tonight. Gemma's plays have been produced in Chicago, Boston, and New York. She was a runner-up for the 2016 James Jones First Novel Fellowship and has been awarded artist residencies from Catalonia to Virginia and a grant from the Barbara Deming Fund. Gemma is a doctoral candidate in literacy education at Syracuse University. Please welcome Gemma. Oh, you know what? It appears that Gemma might, oh, okay. We were having another moment of technical difficulties. Fortunately, it looks like they were fleeting for just a moment. So you won't have to wait for me to do the Macarena. And Gemma, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, we just introduced you, so take it away.
Fabulous. Sorry about my connectivity issues. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to be reading the first half of a short story called Mission Accomplished, which is unpublished. And if you hear somebody clattering around in the background, I have a dog who is tapping on the floor at regular intervals. Mission accomplished. I got Yaz off 3 times the night we started bombing Iraq. I didn't know what else to do, and I guess she didn't either. We'd gone to the protests a few weeks before, marching with a Schuyler contingent, even though Yaz had nothing to do with college. But that worldwide movement, we'd seen pictures from everywhere, from Canada to South Africa, hadn't stopped the bombs we'd watched explode in the darkness across oceans and continents. Yaz started crying when she came down, buried her face against my collarbone, and said something that sounded like, "Stop." She fell asleep with her arm belting my stomach, face hidden, strands of hair mussed against the hair in my armpit. I don't know when I fell asleep. The room seemed abnormally dark, even for a garden apartment like ours, which in Western New York winter is just a basement. Even the thin light that normally spilled from the tiny yard was gone. I stared into the dark ceiling, willing images of bombs to stop exploding against it. I woke with Yaz turned away from me, too far to spoon, holding the cow print pillow to her chest. She jumped when I put my hand at her nape, but not as if I had woken her. "Is it late?" she asked. I don't know. Both of us still refused to get cell phones, Yaz because of her electrical engineer father's paranoia about surveillance. Me because it just seemed too demanding. I didn't like anyone to place demands on me but Yaz. We had an old-fashioned digital clock on our nightstand, the kind with flipping numbers. It had been my aunt's. Yaz liked it because it reminded her of Groundhog Day, the first movie she had watched on TV when she arrived in the US. I leaned over Yaz to see it. 8:12. "I'm gonna be late." Her voice was flat. "Call in." "I don't want to talk to people." "I'll call in for you. They don't know about you." "I'll pretend I'm you." I did. My mimicry wasn't bad. Yez watched me for a second, then rolled over as I heard someone answer the phone. The lab supervisor, Gina, said, "Oh, of course," with a kind of theatrical understanding. I tried to imitate Gina's tone to Yaz, but I felt like a 5-year-old telling a grown-up joke, trying to get a laugh from something I wasn't really in on. Yaz didn't laugh anyway. She studied my ear, said, "Yeah, she's like that." and brushed my arm lightly with her nails as she walked towards the bathroom. Skylar was still on spring break, so I didn't have to work either. While Yaz was in the shower, I made an omelet with olives, parsley, and feta cheese, and looked at the Buffalo News, the Chicago Tribune, and the Washington Post on my laptop, swallowing sickness at images of bombs hitting the presidential palace, soldiers making the incursion into Basra. They were filed, according to their captions, only a few hours before. Sometimes I was still amazed by the internet, everything both immediate and far away. I didn't notice Yaz coming to stand beside me, one green towel knotted at her chest and another around her hair. She flipped the laptop shut and said, holding up the plated omelet, "Is it okay if I take this back to bed?" I shrugged, nodded. I watched her back, a few wet strands of hair escaping the second towel. I wanted to reach for Yaz, to open a palm between her shoulder blades as if it would comfort her, provide some protection. She closed the door behind her. Yaz and I met 3 weeks after September 11th. Buffalo was just close to and far enough from New York City, and I was just close to and far enough from college, that by the beginning of October, I was truly lost. Yaz, sitting on a stool at Millie's, different in color and style from most of the patrons, seemed to know exactly where she was. Of course, it didn't hurt that she was so gorgeous as to emit light from bare, delicate shoulders. I don't know what she saw in me, and I've always been a little afraid to ask her, but our chemistry that night startled us both. I'd gone to Millie's planning to take someone home, to fuck out my weird, chaotic energy. 4 years of college had cultivated in me a deep appreciation for sex as forgetting. But I clung to Yaz as if to a buoy in a crashing sea. Sweat had streaked her eyeliner, light gray trails running to jaw and ears. I had never seen anyone prettier, and I told her so. "Shut up," she said, running fingernails straight along my underwear line. I was no longer wearing underwear. Yaz hadn't said anything about the ungroomed state I had allowed myself to get to, nor had she seemed to mind it. She had a substantial bush too, but hers was well trimmed and shaped. She was straddling my thigh, surprisingly velvety. "No, I mean it. How many girls have you seen naked?" If I thought the question was a little much for our first time, I didn't want her to know I thought that. 8, including you. "And you're how old?" 21 until next month. You'll see someone prettier." "I don't want to see anyone prettier." "So you admit they exist." She was leaning down, pecking my neck, my collarbone. Her nipples brushed mine. Her hand with its gentle, short fingernails had started to move inward, and she put her full weight on my leg when I squirmed. "They might, but it's hard to imagine." "They do exist, I promise. They just don't fuck as good as me." She pushed her finger in at the same time she said it, and I squealed. She laughed, tilting her head back, and I saw shadows on the roof of her mouth and clean, tiny teeth. Neither of us had thought of ourselves as U-hauling types, but within a month we were spending almost every night together. I hadn't lied to Yaz, but I had been talking big. She was the first woman I had ever spent more than one night with. I had never had a girlfriend, never fallen in love before. Yaz was actually the one to say it first. The word love dark in the back of her throat, but I jumped to respond as if she'd just introduced me to language. What surprised me was how physical it was to be in love with her. I don't mean sex, I mean that Yaz almost immediately felt like part of my body. Her laughter elevated me as if I were both comedian and audience. Once or twice I came just by making Yaz come. When she told me about her high school girlfriend who had outed her to the school and her parents, I mirrored the stiffness in her shoulders, and I felt her start to cry before there was sound or tears. Yaz's father, always the gentle hand in the family, had sort of come around, but her mother had died before doing so, and Yaz had never brought a girlfriend home. Her tone made it clear I was by no means guaranteed to be the first. While I couldn't say the new smells of living with someone, body odor from sweating under a quilt, the echoing funk when she just used the bathroom, were pleasant, they were familiar, almost mine. I came to know Yaz's stories so well that I might have lived them. I tried to explain these feelings to Yaz, my girlfriend. My girlfriend. She snorted, reached down to cup me, and said, "Yeah, so what you mean is right now you're masturbating." Masturbating was one of the words she had an accent on, that British schooled accent opening and widening the letter A. That wasn't what I meant at all, but explaining further seemed hopeless, so I kissed her. Yaz's family had moved to the US when Yaz was 11. Yaz, her parents, and her brother Jabir had gotten citizenship somehow, through Dr. Obeidi's work as an engineer and then an engineering professor. Yaz's aunt in Iraq had been involved in some anti-Ba'ath Party activism for a couple of years when they departed. "I don't know, Shan," Yaz had said impatiently when I pressed her for details. "I was a kid. It was just better we got out." The family's English had been pretty good. Yaz and her brothers went to a British-run school in Baghdad, but the sharp hallway ricochets of American English made junior high discomforting for Yaz. She'd found only one close friend, Dunya, who became her girlfriend when they were sophomores and then betrayed her. Even hearing Dunya's name made me tense, 2 streaks of fire down my back. Another Arab American from a private, tentative family. She knew exactly how hard she was fucking Yaz over by outing her. I hadn't yet come out to my own mother, who was really my only family, when I met Yaz. That left a choice between lying or taking about 5 new steps at once when Yaz and I moved in together. And I chose the latter. My mother, always drawn to outsiders, processed it fairly well, but she and Yaz never managed to get along. Mom seemed to expect Yaz to be more like the Croatian and Bosnian teenage waitresses she'd been managing at Polly's Cafe since the mid-90s, most of whom were, by nature, according to my mother, hesitant and deferential to authority. Yaz's irreverence appeared in any conversation within 5 minutes. It was one of my favorite things about her. Mom kept glancing at me when Yaz made a sarcastic comment, or even one that relied on sophisticated English, then quickly refocusing on Yaz when I didn't try to mitigate her discomfort. When Yaz and I talked about Mom after that first dinner, Yaz just shrugged. "It's a pretty normal kind of racism," she said. "Whatever, I've seen it before." I was too upset to talk for several hours after she said racism, even though I thought she might be right. A day into the war, and then another, I followed troop movements and bombings even though I'd never understood anything about the military. Watched us secure petroleum fields. Of course, Yaz said. Battle for Nasiriyah. I read headlines aloud after dinner. Yaz sometimes got up in the middle and walked to the bedroom, short hair mussed to one side, but I couldn't stop myself. I scoured the papers, as if they would offer something to do, something to change. About a week in, when I read something about a city called Kirkuk, Yaz gasped and swallowed. I watched her throat jump, my mouth slightly open, waiting. "Go on," she said. "What?" "That's where my aunts are, my dad's sisters. Go on." I read the article, then another at her request. My voice was getting tired, but she wouldn't look at the screen, so I read a third. I sat with the computer on my lap, facing the coffee table and the front wall with its tiny high windows. Yaz was sideways on the couch, her toes tucked beneath my thigh. She shook me off when I reached for her foot while I was reading. But after I'd put the laptop on the coffee table, she let me cradle her heels in my hand. Her eyes were closed, green eyeshadow hastily brushed. "Do you talk to them a lot?" I asked. "Does your dad?" Yaz shook her head. I don't know about my dad." "Do you remember them from when you were a kid?" "That's not the point." I hadn't realized until then that there was a point. I put her feet down gently on my thigh. She frowned, turned, and reached for the slippers that her friend Lena had knitted for her, green and blue stripes. "I used to go there all the time," she said, "when we were kids." The photographs with the articles weren't helping me picture it. Bombs flashing in the night again. Desertscapes with tents. Soldiers in camo standing in front of blocky beige buildings. What was it like? It was my auntie's house. I don't know. My auntie Zaytun had these red tiles in her hallway, and they were always cold, no matter how hot it was outside. Yaz shrugged, looking at our exposed brick wall. "What does it look like? What were the people like?" There was the store around the corner that a husband and wife owned, and the husband made really good kleja. They're like, I don't know, they're these swirly cookies with dates in them. My auntie Nejia would take me and Jabber to get some every day. Mustafa and Bassem would pretend they were too old to go until we got back, and then they'd try to steal ours. I'd never met either of Yaz's oldest brothers. Both of them had already been married by the time their parents decided to move, and they'd stayed behind in Baghdad. Bassem and his family lived in Dubai now, but they'd never been to the States. Yaz wasn't out to either of them, so they'd never heard of me. I just mean, like, what kind of a place is Kirkuk? Yaz shrugged. If someone asked you what kind of a place Buffalo is, could you answer? Kind of. Go ahead. You know, it's kind of a Rust Belt city, but it's also like it has this sense of history. You can feel what it was like in the Industrial Revolution. Nothing you just said would mean anything to an Iraqi. Yaz raised an eyebrow, expanding the smoky green shade underneath. I mean, you know, an Iraqi who never lived here. Those aren't actually feelings. It's just hard to... You can't, not quite. There was something final about her voice. The topic closed. She sat up. Also, I'm not going to be home next Wednesday. What's up? We're having dinner. Ranya's having a baby. What? Oh my God! I grinned, realizing how stiff my face had been. Rania, Jabber's wife, was a bubbly, round-cheeked pharmacist who had only worn vivid jewel-toned hijabs since September 11th, and the only member of Yaz's family who liked me without hesitation. We're going to be aunts for real. I stopped abruptly, looking at my girlfriend. Yaz shrugged and looked away. My breath hissed between my teeth as I asked, did they tell you I couldn't come? It's just easier, Shan. So it's not Rania and Jabber, it's just easier for you? You know what Jabber's like. Barely, because I barely see him. Yaz shook her head hard, dark strands fluttering. Shan, seriously, not now. When do I get to really know your family? I asked, blinking. It's just not easy for me. That was what she always said about this subject, and I blinked again as my frustration built behind my eyelids. I didn't say it was, but they're important to you, and I want to think I am too. And I'm supposed to talk to them about it now? She was supposed to talk to them about it long before this, but I didn't say it. She watched the floor by my foot. I stood, grabbed a sponge, and started brushing crumbs from the kitchen counter. I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much. Thank you to Connor and Gothic Funk. Thank you to Irene and Latasha and the upcoming Jan.
And thank you, Gemma, for sharing that wonderful piece. Can people hear me? I'm not seeing it right now.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So I'm just going to switch it to gallery view for a moment, and then switch it back to speaker view because my my screen had kind of frozen there. Okay. There we go. Okay. Finally, and I wanted to add real quickly, if you enjoyed Gemma's fiction as much as I did, you should also, by all means, check out her poetry. Her collection, we might as well be underwater, is available, and for all of our writers, we have links to purchase their work posted on the event and also on Gothic Funk Press. So be sure to check that out for all of our guests tonight. For her entire adult life, Jan Worth Nelson has been devoted to the power, beauty, and possibility of the word. From her years as a reporter, Peace Corps volunteer, writing teacher at the U of M Flint, to the last 6 years as editor of Flint's venerable East Village magazine, Worth Nelson has reveled in language and its connections to sustaining a compassionate, robust, and democratic society. Her poems, short stories, and essays have been widely published. with recent work appearing in Belt Magazine, Gravel, Nice Cage, Hypertext, and Happy Anyway, a Flint anthology. Her 2017 poem, The Hilarious Funeral in LA, which appeared in Exposition Review, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Before the pandemic hit, she clings to two recent affirming and memorable events, the Flint Festival of Writers and, last summer, a tumble into the Flint River, where her kayak upended and she survived, along with her poet friend Sarah Carson, soggy and humbled just after seeing a parade of blue herons and a bald eagle. It was worth it. Since everything in this world is material, the writer's gold mine. She lives in a beloved 1930s Flint house with her husband, Ted. Please welcome Jan Worth Nelson.
All right. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me okay? Good, okay. I too want to add my voice of thanks to Connor, to Gothic Flint Press, to these wonderful other writers. I'm so pleased and honored to be here with Latasha and Gemma. And thank you both for your wonderful work. Very, very gripping and enjoyable. Thank you very much to both of you. So I've been thinking about California. I have a complicated relationship with California. And last week when we were originally going to have this, California was in even worse shape, I think, than it is now. Our bartender can attest to that, I think, and we're so glad that you're okay. So I decided that I wanted to read some poems about California from my life in California. I spent many years going back and forth as Ted and I were becoming close and then rediscovering each other in middle age. And I've thought so much about how California is so often a place of where you go for a new start, at least it has been for many people, to recapture some lost dreams. And what strikes me about California is that oftentimes the dreams kind of don't work out right, or they become complicated, or they lead you back to where you started, which was Flint, Michigan for me. So I'm going to read a number of California poems, and I'm going to end with one or two from Flint. The first one is called Coconut Chicken. I need to make something with at least a dozen steps, a dish requiring ingredients not on any ordinary shelf, nothing from past lives, nothing passed down from anybody, a recipe with no mother behind it. I need to make a list with nothing on it that hurts, to navigate unfamiliar stores, coarse aisles, not knowing where to find a thing. To come back, my little car banking stoutly around coastal curves, the gray ocean opening up, and my little bag of trophies, coconut milk, Asian sauces, water chestnuts, and a tiny tin of turmeric snug at my unencumbered side. I need to take pains and take my time in California, which is not my state. And in June gloom, fog swirling east from Catalina, my bare feet cold on old tile floors, I need to dredge pink cubes of chicken through coconut and brown them in peanut oil 2 by 2 and simmer them in rich milk. And when I'm done, pile them on a platter over plump rice for people who barely know me, but who will take my coconut chicken and smile and eat it and say, it tastes good. We spend most of our time in San Pedro, California, which is right on the coast. And there are big cliffs. If you're familiar with LA, San Pedro is on a kind of a curvy point. This is a story about something that happened tragically quite often on those cliffs. It's called A Reason. Wide open roses tumble over fences this peaceful morning, wild dill trembling in the ocean breeze, air so pure I am breathing in blue. I feel my blood get redder, my hot spur skin tip its cells up to the sun. This day, I almost take my happiness for granted, walking my sprung senses serenely across the sea, where grasses bend and stand up, where bougainvillea spills down every wall and eave. But I am walking with a reason to see where a woman jumped or fell. They didn't know which. On Tuesday, it happened close to noon, they said. So cruel, full sun. They found her body at 3 in the clackety stones of low tide. I am here to try to know, I think, how my random luck collides and cleaves to what might have been her despair. The truth in my heart, like a sprig of sage, how those tough cousins, our hope and hopelessness, can be such rivals, sometimes depending on the curve of the rose that morning, the kiss or the missing kiss of one azure day. One thing I liked about being close to the ocean was the tides. And I love these little tide tables. You get little books that have all the numbers in them, and they were beautiful. So I wrote this poem called Tide Tables, and you might recognize there's a form there. It's a pantoum, which is one of my favorite forms. I used to teach it to my students and require them to try to write them. So you can let me know later in the question and answer portion if you think I achieved the pantoum adequately here. Tide tables. The little book fits lightly in my hands, a prayer, its rows of days and times, so soothing and beguiling. And in my hands, a prayer, your body tenders pleasure, so soothing and beguiling, I want to live forever. Your body tenders pleasure, the ocean out there moves, I want to live forever. Will time run short? The ocean out there moves. You say you love my silver skin. Will time run short? The moon arcs over. You say you love my silver skin. The blue earth swells. The moon arcs over. With all this pull and push, the blue earth swells. I dream my charts, I delve in all this pull and push, Earth's comely syzygy and neap. I dream my charts, I delve. I love the moon, Earth's comely syzygy and neap, its ancient salty tumult tides. I love the moon and Earth's dependable surrender, my own life's salty tumult tides. No need to hide or fear, surrender, my own heart's thrall to what attracts. No need to hide or fear the time that fits so lightly in my hands. When Ted and I were first started getting reacquainted, as many of you know our story, we met when we were young in the 70s, and then we didn't see each other for 25 years. Then we reconnected, and reconnecting in middle age when you've had a very powerful, useful encounter is equally powerful and complicated. One day we were in San Pedro, and they have a wonderful aquarium there, and the two of us decided to go visit it together. So this is the poem that resulted. At the aquarium. In a parking lot at the lip of the Pacific, children in blue uniforms are learning to be blind. Eyes pressed under red bandanas, right arms outstretched to the next. They slowly advance, together a centipede, uncertainly curling. Poor kids, my old friend says, playing out some teacher's way of learning empathy. But maybe it will work. I am glad to be here in this merciful place, arm in arm with him, grown-ups slipping out of old lives, still unsure. He says he used to bring his kids here a life ago on Sundays. He shows me what they liked most, octopus and starfish. Halibut and clams go about confined routines behind glass. We look at everything, advance, recede, chambered nautilus and bright endangered coral, lobsters loll in eelgrass, anchovies cluster, anemones unclench. Lingering from shell to shell, I'm seized by this exact moment, how we two cleave together, how we're all out of place, half blind and trying to be saved. I squint at my own face swimming by glass, pale as trout and worn with loss. Tanks glow like neon. The light behind us dims. I wish we shared this fleeting past. There's no time to come this way again. Yet there's love in this redeeming place, and in this liquid hour, I almost make my peace with history. Outside, no giggling. The kids are sober, scuffling on concrete step by step, stunned perhaps by what they can't see, reaching for the shoulder ahead, adjusting for the grip of the hand from behind. I'm going to read The Hilarious Funeral in LA. The one that, this is a very pleasing poem for me. So early in my life, I was a newspaper reporter in Southern California. And then, so when I started going back decades later with TED, it was disorienting because I started running into some of the people that I had been a reporter with at this wonderful little paper. It was an amazing experience in Orange County. For 5 years, I worked down there. And in the meantime, and one of those times was when one of the guys that I had worked for died. And he was quite a character. And as I say in the poem, he had sort of scared me when I was a young kid. He was a tough newspaper editor. So we end up, well, you'll see in the poem, it was disorienting once again. At the time, I was also struggling with a whole bunch of really bad pollen allergies. So my body physically was in all kinds of turmoil. And so that's the setting for this poem. The Hilarious Funeral in LA. So I am not at home here. Since way back in the 70s, I've been trying, but then I'll see something like on the way to a funeral along Coast Highway, there's a lone white heron picking at weeds in the salt marsh, silent apostrophe in the blunt blocks of condos, new ones every day, walls of plywood and rebar pushing up to the edge of the clotted 4-lane, overdone tourists toting boogie boards and frowns along crowded crosswalks. How can I love where the heron disappears into a swamp of t-shirts, yogurt, and tattoos? Jesus, it's so sad. All the big hard edges, all the short-lived ripples of the little birds. In the lush clubhouse courtyard, where people line up to parse the departed and nibble catered chimichangas, I feel my throat constrict again as it has been all spring with pollen from the slutty mulberry, walnut, and ash. Or is it the bloom of mortality in the bleached midday light? Or here's a truth. I was scared of the deceased until the day he died, which is why I'm here. When people called him son of a bitch, I sensed they meant it fondly, but I never got it. I wasn't expecting so much laughter. My old friend Ellen brings me a cold limonada, and penned into the crowd of morning raconteurs, everybody telling stories about everybody else they could think of for the fun of it, for being alive when the dead guy's not, in the grievously glaring sun. I wrap my hand around the frosty can, and I'm glad to have it to hold. And my old friend says how he won a prize once for writing a story about cockfighting, and how he did just the whole thing over the phone. He never set foot in a cockfight, and he says he never would. And we are both laughing, like in the old days we shared with the dead guy who scared me. And my throat is still tight, but I don't care. And it feels so good. It's so funny. And I love my old friend. And I remember how it used to feel to laugh all the time when I was afraid. And now I'm feeling great and letting the laughter roll out more, feeling it in my stomach and my heart at the hilarious funeral, letting it all go, even the sadness of the fleeting heron. Okay, just how am I doing on time? Do I get time for 2 more? Okay. This one, there was a house, this gorgeous house in San Pedro that I was transfixed by it. And it's a typical California house, all kind of growing all around it. And in front of it, this is called Wendy's Flowers. It was clear from the sign that that house belonged to somebody named Wendy. It's so Southern California. So this poem is called Wendy's Flowers. And there was a sign out in front of it that said, "Stop, please do not pick my flowers. Thank you, Wendy." Wendy knows the human heart, how when we walk by her luscious cascade of color at the corner, we can hardly resist. Our senses are already dancing to bossa nova, our noses flared with the musky sea air, and what with the pelicans gliding silently back from their daytime fishing grounds, and the sun sinking over White Point, leaving parfaits of red and pink and gold like bolts of satin. And when we have our arms around each other and we are high on wild anise and a little bit of grass snuck behind closed doors in the roomy beach house, it's hard to say what we might do. Behind the overgrowth of brazen roses, Wendy's redwood house hides like the secret in a fairy tale, dark vagina in a psychedelic bush of jasmine and hibiscus, flirty fan palms, peignoir of willows, bewitching tree ferns, and red azalea. Frankly, we want to get swacked. We want to take Wendy's flowers home, but not just the body blooms, the whole house, the wet stone walk arrowed with birds of paradise, the whole aphrodisiac corner, its full green goblets, enough to keep us drunk till fall. Okay, my last poem is a Flint poem. I think you might recognize some of the flavor of it. It's not a new poem, but it feels like it's right for this becursed year. It's called This World, This World. We have a poster here that's got Malvina Reynolds on it and one of her songs, which is "This old world is mean and cruel, but still I love it like a fool. This world, this world, this world." Sabbath day after sunspots and angst, unnatural sun, thermometer a town crier of dread in this uneasy year, blooms swell too fast on lilac and oak, blue Scylla up a month too soon around the backyard Buddha, a lump in my throat, glum outrage. How can loveliness like this now make us afraid? Contamination of blessings, and who's to blame? It may not matter. And how pathetic, my ludicrous stash of cloth bags, hardly enough to save a single honeybee. On our walk through early dark, Vicky points out Venus, and Jupiter and Mars glint bright, untouched, a perfect distant comfort and rebuke. Vicky says she doesn't feel safe here anymore. I know she doesn't mean our street, green canopy compromised enough. She means this world, and what she says of the children. Her husband is also afraid. Still, we stop at Double J's for ice cream. Familiar drifters part around us, a dozen Tom Waits at the counter. Vicky buys me water and it tastes good all the way home. But even this is guilt. The plastic bottle, an indictment, warming up in my culpable hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And it turns out that 3 readings is just enough to have a leisurely gin and tonic. Kind of the opposite of with Gemma. If you enjoyed Jan's poetry, I also encourage you to pick up a copy of her novel Night Blind, which is the language is just as rich and the story just as enthralling as what you have just heard. So I'm going to open it up for questions, but we've got to tweak it just a bit because there's a lag of about 30 seconds or so between what we're recording and between the broadcast. And anyway, I'm very curious to hear everybody's answer to this. So if you are one of our guests tonight, if you are or somebody who's tuned in and you've got a question for one of our readers, go ahead and type that in as a comment. And in the meantime, I am going to ask our readers to all unmute, and I'm going to put it in gallery view so that we can see everybody. And I want to ask if you are writing during COVID, and if you are, or if you are not, how is it different from how you were writing before all of this happened? So any order, anybody wants to jump in, jump on in.
I've been pretty paralyzed. I don't know about the rest of you.
Yep, same.
Writing feels like kind of the only thing I can do
Really?
right now. I'm finding it a lot more anchoring than I used to, but I don't know what one thing that's true for me is I was nearing completion on a couple of big projects before we went into quarantine, so it felt like something I could actually do to finish drafting and revising those projects. So I think I'm actually like more willing to plan things around it than I was, in a weird way.
I'm like big on writing when I'm spiritually led, and I need time to unwind, and I just haven't had much of that, just because I'm surrounded by kids and a husband all day. And because I hate writing, I hate when I feel like I'm force writing. Like I don't like to force it at all. I like when I'm in that space where it just all flows out naturally, and you know, the thoughts and the words come to me naturally, and then they come out on the paper just, you know, so much so sometimes I'll write and write and write, and then when I read it, I almost don't remember writing the words on the paper. And so I just haven't, I had a moment where I was kind of writing, and then it left. And so I think it's just because I just haven't had a moment to myself like I need to be able to kind of channel that energy to write.
One of my problems has been the challenge of feeling the credibility of an individual experience when millions of people are struggling, and in similar ways, but in many different ways too, and feeling this swarm of anxiety and depression and despair, frankly, and feeling that the individual voice doesn't matter right now, to speak an individual voice when millions and millions of people are, you know, experiencing really extremely rough times. And there are answers to that. I mean, always the individual voice has had power, but I'm personally, individually struggling with that issue.
Well, I also think there's no way for voices to come together collectively unless individual voices are being shared.
Yeah.
Like I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, one thing that's helping me is I'm also a playwright, and I was doing a workshop with some actors on a project before the pandemic, and some of them have been generous enough to keep workshopping with me, and that's been a lifeline, frankly. I'm very high risk, and I live alone, so I'm very isolated, and
it must be isolating. Yeah, I can imagine.
Being able to get into a space like this with other artists, being able to collaborate with actors, that's been tremendous for me.
Yep.
This is actually the best I've felt creatively, is because of this incident. Like I got really depressed last week when it didn't work. You know, I'm like, oh, I really needed that. And it feels very good, and I'm appreciative of that. But I think for some of the reasons you're identifying, Gemma.
one of the things that always is striking to me when I get when there's a question along these lines, any why right variation question, is how, you know, in some ways it's almost kind of a predictable question, but I don't know that I've ever heard two similar answers to it of all the different times I've heard it asked. And it just brings home to me how negotiated the process of writing is. No matter what you're writing or when you're writing, there's always this sort of like internal and external conversation about why do it and what assumptions you take into it and what you hope to achieve with it and how you're going to do that. And everybody has to answer these dozens of different variables in some way before they can proceed with whatever they're writing. And this, you know, doesn't seem like an exception.
No.
So, well, we do not appear to have gotten any other questions. So again, what I'm going to ask now is, if you have been a guest of us, if you've been tuning in and you would like to be entered into the drawing for one of the free books, please comment with your name. And let me do that right now, because then by the time the video feed catches up with us, I'll have some names. But in the meantime, let me explain how this is going to work. Before we say goodbye, somebody is going to win 3 books. First, they will get a copy of Skin Like Mine by Latasha Carter Perry, who you heard read from that wonderful book today. You'll get a copy of Gemma's new collection, Bedside Manner, and you will get a copy of Jan's wonderful novel, Night Blind. And the Gothic Funk Press will order this for you, and we will mail it to your house. Now, I have here a collection of Dungeons and Dragons dice, and depending on the number of people that comment, I will pick a die, and I will assign a number to each name that is submitted, and then I will roll it, and if your number comes up, you will win the books. So that is the hopefully straightforward solution that we came up with. All right, and let me just take a peek. All right, and I'm still waiting a moment for the comments to come in. All right, we have 2 entrants already. Number 1 is Susanna Kittredge. Thank you, Susanna, for tuning in tonight.
Yay, Susanna.
Number 2 is Nathaniel, who I know is tuning in from Ferndale. So thank you for bringing that Oakland County love. And that's okay, Nathaniel. You'll just have to come in next time with another question. And I'm just going to give it a moment. We'll see if we're advancing to the final bracket. So, all right. I think that has given people plenty of time. So I'm going to, I don't like the way the 4-sided die rolls. It's just kind of clunky. I'm going to roll an old-fashioned 6-sided die. And if we get a 1, 2, or a 3, then the books will go to Susanna. And if we get a 4, 5, or a 6, then the books will go to Nathaniel. So everybody, you have to dramatic drum roll, and boom. And it looks like we got a 3. So that is, Susanna is our lucky winner tonight.
Hey.
Susanna, I am going to type down my email address. And if you could email me with your address, I will get those books in the mail for you just as soon as I have received them. And again, I'm so grateful. You know, last week was kind of a fiasco, but you know, our readers rallied, Irene rallied, you all rallied, everybody rallied, and it's just been a lovely night tonight. And so please, everybody, stay safe. Know that we love you all, and we love you for tuning in and for supporting literature in 2020. And see you again, I imagine. All right, wonderful, and have a good night.
Night, everybody.